Awesome. So today we're gonna do a Django polls app, and what we're hopefully gonna accomplish by the end of today is using Django to build a full stack application, which we haven't fully done yet. Well, yeah. Application. We are going to practice creating a database and use models. We are also going to add views that will create, that will allow us to use and connect views. That will allow us to use and connect data to the front end. And pretty much allow us to have functionality in our app. And also we're going to use forms inside the templates to allow the user to interact with our app. So just a bit of review to see the bigger picture of things. We have an HTTP request that comes from the browser that will be handled by our urls.py file, and that will be forwarded to the correct view that is attached to that certain URL. And the view will write and read data connected to the models, and it will send HTTP responses as HTML, and it will connect to the templates, which we will write. So index.html, whatever HTML files that we are writing. So let's start our app. You guys have seen this code many, many times already. So I'm going to create my virtual machine. What was it then? I'm going to call it polls then. Great. Haven't configured that part yet on my new machine. So now I'll activate it. So source. Then activate. There we go. So now we're going to install Django. Okay, that was quick. Also, I'm going to install CyclePG right now, since I remember that I'll need it later. So CyclePG 2. All right. So I'm in the right directory. Now we'll create our project. And I'm going to call it polls project. I'll cd into that, and I will create my app. So start app. Let's do my polls app. Okay, awesome. So let's just check that everything is correct. We'll run our server. Manage.py server. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So what do we want to do now? Let's start with our index view. So we want to create a view that will, what is it called? That will control our index page. First, need to import HTTP. Okay. So I'm just going to return a hello world. You are at the polls index. Save. So what's one thing that we need to remember for this to actually show up?
Register it in settings.
Definitely. So, okay, let's register our app. Installed apps. Polls app. Okay. And
Did you already do the URL?
no, not yet. So that's what I'm going to create. Oops. URL.py. So we're going to import the path. So URLs where it's from. Import path. And then we're going to have our view import. So yes, import views. And we're just going to have it be our base path. Use dot index. Okay. What else do I need to do after this? So I created my URL in the polls app. And
add it in your other URLs page.
yep, definitely. So here, don't really need the admin. Gonna have include installed here. And we're just gonna do it at polls. And we're gonna include our polls app URLs. Circular import. What am I doing wrong? Let's see. Let's gonna run the server again. Still the same. Hold up urls.py.
Do you need the comma at the end? I don't know if it's required.
I don't think it should. No, it shouldn't do anything. Oh, apparently it does. Thank you. Okay, so now we should be able to see something at polls. Okay, awesome. Okay. So, does anyone have any questions? I know we've seen all of this before. No. So we usually do, so as we know, Django is a full stack framework, so it allows us to do both front end and back end together. Usually in the industry, you have two different frameworks. So one handling the back end like Django or Node or Ruby, I think, or Ruby on Rails. And then on the front end, you have like React or Angular or something like that. So today we're handling both. Okay, so now we are going to create or do our database setup. So I want to use Postgres. So I'm just going to change this to PostgreSQL. Let me add, oops. Trying just to make this Zoom view smaller. Okay. What am I doing? Okay. I just want a shell pretty much. So I want to create a database. Create DB. Let's call it polls.db.
Wait, can you show me how you have a terminal that's not in the whatever it's called?
Down here. So you can just drag it. You can drag it wherever you want on the screen.
I don't have an extra one on my side.
Oh, so you can add another one on this and using this plus. So if you press plus here, you can add a new terminal and then you can add that terminal or move that terminal wherever you want.
That one's not in your virtual environment?
No, it starts off as the default one, and then you can move it. Nice. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I actually didn't know that you can put it at the top using tabs, so thank you, Adam, for that. It helps. So I'm actually going to drop the database because I already created it yesterday. Just playing around with it a little. Oops.
So also real quick, don't we have to do Postgres pSQL or pSQL Postgres and then create the database, or no?
So there are two ways to create the database. So when you install Postgres, it gives you this command line. So you don't have to be in Postgres to use this. You can use create DB or drop DB to create and drop databases. But if you want, you could be inside pSQL Postgres, and then I can say create database.
And it does the same thing?
Yeah, and both of them create the database. Yeah.
Okay.
So now.
So do you still have to do pSQL polls.db to go into it if you didn't do the pSQL Postgres first?
Say it again.
So like if you don't do, pSQL Postgres and then the create database, do you still have to do pSQL polls.db to go into it?
Yes. So if you create it just by using create DB outside of pSQL, If you want to actually go into the database and like see the tables and stuff like that, you would do, so now I can do pSQL polls DB.
Okay.
Yeah, so this, I just misspelled it, but yeah. There we go. Does that make sense or? Okay. Okay, so let's go back to, need to hide this Zoom thing. Okay, back to the settings. And we created our polls database. So that should not give us any errors. Awesome. Okay. So Django's architecture is based off of the MVC model, which is model, view, and controller. So what does that really mean? So the controller layer, it can be seen as the brains of the app. So brains of the application. This is where you put your logic, you manipulate, not manipulate, but like work with your data pretty much, work with models. And the models we've already kind of been introduced, that's the actual data. So our controller here is our views.py, because this is where we handle the requests that we're getting, and then we do stuff, and then we return something. This is our views.py. So the view here, it's a little confusing because they use the word view as their controller and something else for their views, but view is pretty much what the user sees. So anything in your templates folder, that will be your views. So your HTML, your templates, all of that stuff. And your model layer is the models. And this connects Python to the database, or Python objects to the database. And we'll see a pretty good example of how that works by the end of today. So let's create some models. So for the polls, we want a question. So we'll create a question, model. It will be of type model. And let's have a question text. And we're going to have it be char field. Oh, I didn't know they do a default thing. That's cool. Models, there we go. Models at char field. And let's do our length to be 200. And we would want also maybe a publication date. So pub date equals models dot date time. And we can give it like a different name or verbose name. We don't really need to do this actually. Okay. we'll create another class for the choices. So class choice. Same thing, models.model. And for this one, so each choice is going to be connected to a question. So we will say, we'll create a question. Models.foreign key. We've seen this before. So we're going to connect this to an object of question of type question. So we want it to be a question, and let's say on delete models.cascade. So can someone tell me what this means?
Isn't it that if something from the choice row is deleted, it deletes everything else in that row too?
It's actually the opposite. So this is if a question is deleted, it will cascade down to its choices. Yeah, so it's pretty much on delete is if this question is deleted, then it will delete the choice that is connected to it. What else?
Is that required parameter? Or is there a default?
I think cascade is the default. There are different ones, like we saw yesterday. I think something null.
Set null.
Set null, yeah. So there's a set null. I guess do nothing. Yeah, there's a few of them. Do you want me to kind of look at them?
No,
or-
I was just curious, like if it's something you have to put in, or if there's like a default value, but it's not a big deal. I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, there is a default. I do believe it's cascade. That's the default.
Thank you.
Okay, let's add choice text. And we'll make that track field with max length 200. And then we want to see how many votes each choice gets. So models, we'll make this an integer field. And default is 0. So if we set this default as 0, we technically don't have to enter anything into the votes when we're creating a new choice. It will automatically set the votes to 0, which is nice. Okay, so now we have these two tables that we want to create. Let me bring this back down here, actually. It's not going to the middle. That's fine. So what do we want to do? Let's go into our project. Actually, we can just quit our server real quick. It's not a big deal. Sorry, I'm just moving. Okay. We can quit our server. We want to create a migration for our model. So what do we do first?
Make migration.
Yep. So Python manage.py make migration. Migrations or yeah. Okay, awesome. So we created our first migration and now we can actually migrate. So manage.py migrate. And awesome, everything looks good. So we can check on it in here. So psql polls db. What are we checking for? The tables. Awesome. Polls app choice and polls app question. Perfect. Okay. So now, actually, does anyone have any questions so far? No? Okay. Awesome. So we saw an example yesterday of using the shell to kind of manipulate our data and add some seed data into our tables. So let's see an example using views today. So I'm going to create a route. Let's start it with our, oops. I have a lot of tabs. Okay. So in my urls.py that is related to the polls app, I'm going to create a new path. So this is also just for demonstration purposes. When you're wanting to add user data or anything else, you don't want to just kind of create it in the path. So let's do, oops. Poll/add question. Let's call it add question. And then we're going to send in a string. Let's call it question text.
I actually did want to ask about that. It seems like this method of, I can't even remember what it's called, string query maybe, seems like really like you would not use this in the real world very often, because you wouldn't often find a user who would just know, hey, I just need to type into my URL here, this extra information to get there. Like, am I right in that?
Yeah, I agree. In that case, you would mostly use like, this is kind of like for APIs to send in some data, but regardless, you're not sending in the data directly in the URL name. You'll have kind of like an endpoint that you can send stuff to using like the post and like the post get and what was the third one? Yeah, those methods like we did with Axios and stuff like that.
Yeah. So do we, I mean, not to sound picky or whatever, and if you say no, that's totally fine. Obviously, it's your lecture, but can we like not do it that way if we're like never going to use it that way?
So this part is only for the demonstration. So this is the only part that you don't have to worry about, but the part in the view, this will actually be a little helpful to see.
Okay.
Because, oh,
I'm sorry, no, continue.
what were you saying?
So I just want to say that this is a pretty useful technique, actually. Having the parameterized URL is what it's called. So this is a little bit different than a query string. Those are just kind of two different formats for just adding data into the URL. But to your question, Alicia, no one's going to be typing these variables into the URL. You're going to be writing your URLs to like already have this data on it. So can we look at the urls.py for a second here? So we've got a path for add questions slash some string or whatever. So no one's going to be typing that into their URL bar, but we might have like anchor tags on the page that have an href of add questions slash and then some string. So yeah, for the URLs that we write, we are going to utilize this structure, but the user doesn't have to think about that. They're just like clicking on buttons or links, and then it takes them wherever the href says to go.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense than that. Like later interviews will be like sending data to that thing. So that makes sense.
Also, this sort of parameterized URL is nice if you just want to have pretty URLs. So you can like decide what the URL is going to look like basically. Whereas if you use a query string, it just kind of looks like a bunch of data tacked onto the end of it, and it's not very pretty. There's like a lot of punctuation in it. So that's kind of a minor trade-off between these two styles is like, is someone going to be looking at your URLs and it has to be pretty, or is it only going to be consumed by robots and it doesn't matter what the URLs look like, you just want it to be easy to work with. So this is like the slightly prettier version, but it doesn't matter too much one way or the other.
Awesome. Any other questions? All right. So now we go into our views. So here I set, I wanted to create a new view called add question. So let's create it real quick. Add question, and this will take the request as well as the question text. Okay. So one thing we want to do is import our question. So we want to do from .models. Import question. I'm going to import choice because we're going to need it later as well. But now we just need our question. So let's say question equals a new question, and we will send in our text. And what else? Question text and publication date. So question text equals question text. And then our pub date equals, here I'm just going to use a library that allows me to do like time zone stuff or time stuff. So what was it? Django. Utils. Time zone. Okay. So this will allow me to choose the time right now. So we'll do time zone dot now. And yeah, that will automatically give the timestamp for right now to the publication date. Okay. So pretty much all we need to do is question.save. And this should create our question in the database. Let's test it out. Actually, let's also return. We'll return HTTP response, and we're going to send back our question that we just created. Saved all my files. Let's run our server and go here. So we want to add a question. And I'm going to just write whatever text I want. So let's say, what's up? So for string queries, the only thing I don't really know how to format a lot of the characters and stuff. So the only thing I know is space is %20. So we're going to stick to that. So what's up? And that's it. Should return. Okay. So this did not return what I wanted. Good question. Did I misspell it? There we go. It just needed the forward slash. So it returned question object 1. And that's awesome. So that means if we go to the table, we should be able to see that one entry. So select polls app question. Yeah, Dalton.
So would this be one of those situations where like if you were doing this for real, that URL wouldn't be somewhere you would actually like send a user, but that's just somewhere you would get data from, or does that make sense?
Yeah, it wouldn't be something a user would type in, but you could maybe internally kind of reroute to that route and kind of send data through that, if that makes sense. So,
Like-
so maybe a user presses a button and you reroute using that, but it's kind of like an older, not so elegant way of sending data to the back. Does that make sense? If I'm, unless I'm incorrect.
I guess I just, so the thing that confused me with like trying to do stuff like this is, so on the assessment 30, when you needed to, like if you were gonna add to the cart or you were gonna do the search, it's
Mhm.
like you had to create a request that you just shot off, but you never showed the user that. And I guess I just kind of get confused of knowing like, when is that something that I'm gonna have to do, or like what situation warrants it?
Yeah, for this, you don't have to show the user this. So this kind of would be in the back end, just rerouting stuff. In a more perfect world, this would be a form and we would send the text. And we would have the text put in an input and you can have a submit button that would reroute to add question. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
The add question route that we created is essentially our own API endpoint that we're using to send data to our backend, like you're saying, Zainab. And my understanding is that's not a route that we would use to like show, like the user wouldn't navigate to that route to see stuff on the page. We use it to send data to the backend.
Yep. So right now I'm just doing this because I for time's sake, if creating a whole form for this is a little, it's not that long, but we have other stuff that I want to get to. That's why.
So I'm trying to follow along here, but when I do select star from polls app question, it's not showing anything, even though I got the question object to show up on my page.
Mhm.
Is there some, oh, you know what, I forgot about the,
Semicolon.
Yeah, I hate that as well.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's the semicolon, that's what it
Did it
was.
show up?
Sorry. Yeah, it's the semicolon.
Awesome. Okay.
Good call, Michael.
Okay. Where do
Oh,
you-
okay, yeah, so I also wanted to clarify, because Dalton's question was my same question of, this seems like a really archaic way of creating a new question. So normally, normally you would create a form and then through the form, send that data, grab that data from JavaScript and then send it to Django and then have a URL that adds it to your database?
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Yeah, Daniel.
sounds like all the stuff we want to go back over, so that'll be good.
So this is, we're using a GET request to add info to the database here, right? I mean, through an HTTP GET request, right? Instead of like a form, which would be post, just to. that-
Right now we're not doing a GET request. We are just touching a URL that is redirecting us to our view. So we're going to this URL and we're sending in a string. And this is just going to our views add question, and it's sending the string as a parameter. So
Sorry,
Yeah.
I want to clarify real quick. If the user types anything into their browser's URL bar, that's sending a GET request to that URL. So for our add question route that we have currently, if users are adding questions by just typing in the URL bar and putting the question text as that last parameter, that would be using a GET request in that case. But you are correct that that's a little bit unconventional. That's kind of just like the quick and dirty way we can present this demo, because we're really more focused on the backend aspect of it, on the database here. But for a more common conventional kind of situation, you would prefer to use a post request when you're asking the server to create new data. Submitting a form, traditional form submission, can be either GET or POST. You would usually use a POST request for submitting a form. But please don't get too hung up on that right now today. We're really trying to focus more on the database and kind of cutting a few corners in terms of how the data actually gets up there from the front end.
Got it, thanks.
I'll also just throw in that people do use GET requests to send data to the database, even though they shouldn't. It definitely happens, and there's no like technological reason why it can't be done. It's more just convention. So it's not like this stuff is totally out of bounds in terms of like what might be used in certain situations. But yeah, it's not the convention. It's not kind of the way we're teaching like the right way to do it, but it's totally technically possible. And there are certain situations where either for expediency or like other reasons where like people will do it.
Thank you for the clarification, both of you. Okay, so we saw here that it returns this, which isn't really that informative. It just says the question object with the ID. We could actually change that if we go to the models and add a string formatting method. So like we've seen in Python before, if we add underscore string method, this will just format it to be nicer if we just want to print out the object itself. Self.id is the ID. Oops. Put in curly braces. There we go. And then our question text is self.question text. Okay. So I can do the same thing for choice. We don't need it right now, actually. But yeah, you can add these to all of the models if you want to just print them out like that. So this is just also for our sake right now. So if I do this again with a different question, hey, so ID 2, question text is hey. Okay. So now we're able to add some questions using just this. I will also add a few choices to the question that gets added. And the way to do this is you can say question dot choice set dot create. And then we send in the choice text. So again, in a perfect world, I would have a different method to create the choices, and I would actually take in the user input, but right now, just for the demo, I want to show you how you can use the Python to create, what is it called? Create a choice for the question. So if we didn't have already this question here, we would have to look it up. So we would say question equals, we saw this yesterday, so question.objects.get, and we just send in the ID. So ID equals whatever ID we were looking for. Let's say 1, but yeah, this is pretty much the format to get a certain question based on a certain attribute. So if we were looking for it based on text, we would change this to question text and then put the actual text that we're looking for. So let's create this with not much. And we can add the votes because that's what our model has. So we have choice text and we have the votes, but we could also not put anything since it is on a default. So we can do that, and I'll just create, let's say 3 for each.
Can you explain what the choice set dot create is
Mhm.
doing? I keep trying to find choice set in our models. So I'm thinking this must be some included
Yeah.
text
So
behavior or something.
So when we created our question foreign key here, this automatically ties the question to the choice, right? So one question would have multiple choices. So as a default, Django creates this choices set that is now in your question. So you're able to access any choice through your question by accessing choice set here. So this is an automatically created, what is it called? Created attribute. So
Okay.
if we wanted, this is what you've probably seen yesterday.
I was about to say that. Yeah, I couldn't
Yeah.
remember the default name. It adds set to the end of the bottle name.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
choice set is going to be a list of choices
Mhm.
tied to that question.
Exactly.
Now, we didn't, as far as I can see, we haven't specifically defined any sort of one-to-one, one-to-many relationship or anything like that. So is it because we haven't made any sort of requirements? Is it defaulting to,
One-to-many.
obviously allowing multiple, right? I would
Yeah,
assume.
it's defaulting to a one-to-many.
Okay.
Yeah, so here if we said related name equals choices, in here we would be able to access this through question.choices instead of choice set. But as a default, you don't have to specify this every time. You can just use whatever the model name is. So whatever the object name is underscore set. And that's pretty much the convention for all of them.
But it doesn't have to be capitalized.
No,
Okay.
so it's all lowercase.
And then I'm also assuming that the dot create is some included something.
Which one? Yeah, so dot create is something that is built in where you can create a choice through the question. So this will automatically tie your choice to your question, which is pretty cool. You don't have to kind of connect it in different ways. You can just find your question and then add your choices that are related to that question. Does that make sense? Or any more questions?
Zainab, do you want to maybe show like the
So-
manual slow way or the manual way of creating the choice and connecting it? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Alicia.
Well, so I just want to clarify, after we make this is essentially going to create 3 choices with those choice texts with,
Mhm.
since we're not passing in votes, a default of 0 votes, and it's all going to be tied to
Yeah.
that question, right?
Exactly,
Okay,
exactly. So, I mean, I can set the votes to 0 here too. So this means that if I run this add question with a different text, this is just going to create the same choices for that question. So it's going to be a different choice, but it's going to be the same text because I'm hard coding it in here. Does that make, is that confusing, or does that make sense? So I'm just going to show it to you in the browser. So actually, I am gonna go back to my models and do the string formatting just for this. Choice text. And I just want to get the choice text to save. Okay, so here we'll get the response. We already know that the question creation works. So let's get all of our choices. So choices equals question. So we still have access to our question that we created. Question dot choice set dot all. And this will give us our choices, all of our choices that are related to the question. And okay, let's test it out. I'm gonna clear my database real quick, or my table. What was that question? Okay, so we deleted the questions that I had made before. I'm gonna do what's up. Okay. So the create. Wonder if I missed.
Don't you have to do choices now?
Sorry, say it again.
Don't you have to do choices since you set the related name?
I deleted that. Oh, I did.
Oh,
Yeah, but no, it should still be there. Let's check it out actually. Now if I delete, and I rerun this. Okay, so I guess it won't let you use the choice set if you do choose a related name. So now if you see what it returned, it returned 3 choices. So our first one, not much. Second one, this guy, and then our third one, nothing else. So these are the choices that it created for what's up. So if I do another question, how's it going? It creates another set of choices, which you see the IDs are different. So before we had IDs 1, 2, and 3. Now we have IDs 4, 5, and 6. And this will make a little more sense if you look at the database. So just clear it real quick, which I finally learned how to do. Okay, select pulls app choices. Oops. Can't spell it. Okay, so now we see we have these 3 choices, and they're related to question 4 or question with ID 4. And then these 3, question with ID 5. And the numbers are 4 and 5 because I had created a few before and I deleted. So same if we do the select. Hold that question. So here we have a few different ones. Awesome. Any questions so far? Okay. So with this, I just wanted to demonstrate how we can use our view to add questions, retrieve choices. So yeah, just add data, retrieve data. That's pretty much it for this one.
Before we move on, I just want to say one little bit here. I just want us to all take a moment to appreciate how much work Django is doing for us on lines like 15, 16, 17, the choice set.create. So stuff like that, this is why people use ORMs. This is just like really powerful and flexible and just much simpler than doing it the raw SQL way. So if we imagine if we were trying to do this with raw SQL to create a choice associated with a question, we have to first query the question, get its ID, create a new choice, set the choice's question ID to the question's ID, and then we can save both of them. If this was a many-to-many relationship, we'd have to also create a record in our join table that has IDs referring to both the question and the choice. And so we have to make sure we create all these records in the right order so that the IDs exist to assign them to the other records or whatever. But just saying choice set.create does all this automatically for you. So this would be even better if this was a many-to-many relationship, and saying like choice set.create would create all the records in like the choice table and also in the join table for you automatically, and it would set all the IDs so that things refer to each other correctly. But all we have to do is just use one object to create another object, and Django ORM handles all the SQL complexities automatically under the hood for us. So this is definitely a terrific convenience that we're seeing right here.
Did you have to migrate again for it to show up in your database, or it's just doing it?
No, it's just doing it. The migration is if you change the structure of the table and stuff. So yeah, I only had to migrate that first time when I created the class with the attributes. Does anyone have any questions?
And we don't have any sort of constraints. Every time we're hitting enter on what's up, it's making a new what's up question.
Yeah.
And the choices are having different IDs, even though they're technically the same,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, exactly. They're the same text, but they're not the same choices because it's creating a new choice, just the same text because we hard coded that.
Right. And can I see your P-SQL tab again?
Yes. Here we go.
So you just did select. Okay, thanks.
And that you do raise a good point, Alicia, that like for a real world app, we would want to think about if we want to allow like choices that have the same text for the same question. And if not, introduce some application code or some kind of validation to prevent that.
Awesome. Any more questions? Okay, I think we're due for a break, so maybe we'll come back at 10:30 and we'll continue and we'll add some more functionality and actually see the voting and stuff like that.
Can you just do the select all from polls app question real quick? Is it gonna look the same or is there gonna be more?
This one, it's this one. Yeah, this was the last one that I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Shouldn't there be more than 3, or am I missing something?
No, I deleted them, so I cleared the table where I
okay.
created them again. Yeah.
Thank you.
I didn't see you deleting those. You're just, how did you delete that?
So you can do delete from, and then whatever table you have, and that will clear out the entire table. So if I hit,
And that will do the entire table.
yeah, that would clear the table.
I got 6 what's ups is going on in the table here.
I just want to add a quick comment about that SQL snippet you just showed, Zainab. So yeah, if you write a delete clause, like by default, that's going to delete the entire table. you have to specify where to say like which specific records you want to delete, if you want to delete not the entire table. So that's, I think, a pretty common like beginner mistake, is that you're going to write a delete statement to delete like a few records, but then you forget the where clause and then accidentally hit enter early, and then you've accidentally deleted your entire table. So me personally, when I'm writing raw SQL for like delete and update statements, I'll actually write the where clause first before I even write the word delete or update, just to be like 100% sure there's no way I can like execute this statement on the entire database accidentally.
So the where doesn't have to be the last. You could put it on your first line.
Oh no, it does have to be last. I'm saying I
Oh.
write the last line first.
Okay.
It looks a little goofy when you see me do
Yeah.
it, but I'm
Makes
just trying to be safe.
That's a good piece of advice. Yeah, and like if I ever had to like execute SQL for like a database with real data, I would like type it out in a text file first and, you know, like triple check and ask someone else to look at it and like all sorts of stuff. In that same vein, I will say once we have models and like and like validators that we're using on those models, when we can, rather than using SQL to delete stuff, we probably want to use the models through the shell so that we can be sure we're using whatever validator and logic there is there. And I say that because it's like, I don't want to have to think about the complexity of, all right, does the SQL capture all the rules I had in like the models and things like that. For this case though, that's more like when we start to have like more models and more complexity and stuff. That's not relevant to this instance.
Awesome. Yeah, so are you guys ready for a break? Yeah. Awesome. When should we come back? Maybe 35? Give them 10 minutes.
35 sounds good.
Okay, awesome. See you guys at 10:35.
Actually, I have a question real quick.
Yeah.
So on your add question function, where it says question dot choice set, is
Mhm.
that taking the question, that's question from the choice model, correct?
Question. So no, this is just a question.
Oh, the object. Okay.
It's the yeah. It's the object that we created or we retrieved, and then it has connected to it a choice set, because when we created our model, we gave a choice, what is it called? A foreign key to questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more questions? All right. So now what we're going to do is write a few pages to get the details of the questions and then be able to vote on the questions and see the results. So we'll start by adding some URLs. So let's add one where it's just the question ID. So int question ID. And this will be our detail page. So u.detail use X. And we're going to add another one, which will give us our results. Use that results. And then a third one for our vote. Awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of separate these. These are our main ones. Okay, so now that we created our routes, we're going to go into the views and create some handlers. So our first one is detail. Take our request and question ID. And for now, we're just going to return an HTTP response similar to this. I'll just type it out. We're looking at question and session ID. And then same for the result page. Looking at the results and a similar one for vote. You are voting on question. Okay. So now okay, I fixed the typo. So now let's confirm that it's working. So if we just go to polls, it's still there. I think one of our questions was ID 4. So we're looking at question 4, and then results, vote. Okay, cool. Oh, this is just the actual, okay, cool. Okay, so now we want to create some templates so we can actually see more on the pages rather than just this line. Let's create a folder called templates. And within this folder, we create another folder called polls app. And then in polls app, we're going to create an index.html. Okay. So let's start with an H1. So we want to put all of the polls over here on this page. Going to be a little slow typing HTML because I'm not fully used to it. Okay, so we're going to create a an if statement to check that we actually have a list of questions. So if latest question list, that's what we're going to call it. So if this exists, then we're going to create a list. With a for loop, looping through all of our questions. So for question in this question list, we want this item with a link. So Okay. Make sure. And here we're gonna give it the URL, so polls. And question ID. So question dot ID. Oops. And then we're gonna put the question text next to it. So question dot. Question text. Close out our tag. And our list of elements. And 4. And then end it.
I'm sorry, I think I missed it. Where does latest question list come from?
So we're going to send that from the view. So we don't have it yet, but we're just giving it a name right now. So
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
this latest question list is going to come from our view, and we're gonna fix it up here.
Okay, thanks.
Close the tab. And so if we don't have a list, then we're gonna do else. We're just gonna say no polls are available. And then we're gonna end it. All right. I'm pretty new to Django, and this is a little, it's interesting syntax. I'll just say that. Okay. So now this is supposed to be for our index. So let's change the view to actually return that list of latest questions. So let's create the list. So latest question list. Question dot objects dot get all. Oops. So I could do a get all or dot all to get it, but let's say I want to order them by the publication date. So I can do order by, and I'm gonna do publication date or pub date. So since this is a date, I want to retrieve the latest ones first. So I would want it to be in descending order. So all I have to do for that is just put a minus sign in front of it, and that will return it in a descending order. And then I'm going to create my data. So my data that I'm going to send back is going to be in the form of a dictionary. So I'll give it a key, which is the name of our list. So this is going to match the name that I gave it here. So latest question list. And I'm going to send in latest question list. Awesome. Okay, so what are we returning? So here we are going to do a render. And the render function allows us to render our HTML page with the data that we're sending in. And it takes in the request that we took in. It also takes in the, like, where is the URL pretty much. So going to be in polls app / index.html. Sorry, where is our template? So it's going to render this template. And we're going to send in our data.
I also wanted to ask, so we're rendering it to the page that obviously is handled by this function. But can you render it anywhere? So like just thinking of like our shopping cart example, right? Could we render it to any page we wanted to?
I mean, you would render the page that you want to show. Is that like, are you saying you have to choose only one specific template? Like, as long as there's a template, you can render your template and data, like any template pretty much.
Okay.
But like, could we have multiple of these going to the index one, or can you only have one going to the index?
No, you could have multiple. So maybe you have detail that will do some stuff and then render your index .html again, and that's completely fine. Yeah, because they're not happening all at once. That each view will only be called like once per URL call. That makes sense. Any questions? So what we're expecting here is going to be a list, right? A list of the questions, and here we go. Awesome. So here we have, it links to the detail page. And go back. Awesome. So this part works. Any questions before we move on? Yes. Awesome. All right. So now, what are we going to do? Let's add some more information in the detail page. So with the detail page, we have access to the question ID. So we want to get the question ID. So question is going to equal question.objects. Where ID equals question ID. All right. And then what do we want to send in our data? Can anyone tell me?
Would it be
Hmm?
the key would be data or question, and then just the value is also question?
Exactly, yeah. So in the detail page, we just want to send the entire question with back. Awesome. And then here we can render, just copy it. And now instead of index, we're going to render detail. .html, and we're going to send the data. So also an alternative, if you don't want to predefine your data, you could just send it in here, like create it in here. So you could also, this is valid syntax also. You can do that. Okay, so now we're handling what our detailed page is going to do. Let's actually create it. So do detail.html. Okay, now it's in the right folder. And we're just gonna put details about question and then question.id. And we can also display maybe as a text. So we'll do this and then question text. Which I do like the autocomplete here. Very, very helpful. And H2, and then we can have a list of our choices. Well, and so when we grabbed our question, the question still has access to the question, the choices list, which is great. It's so much easier for us to just access it here. So for choice in question dot choice set dot all. A list item with our choice text. Now we can end a for loop. And oh, okay. And let's check on how it's going. So awesome. So now we have details and then we have our 3 choices. Any questions so far? Okay. So now it's nice to see all the choices over here, but we can't actually vote on any of them. So it's just a list. So let's actually do a form, which will make it easier for us to vote. So instead of this, create a form. And our action is going to be to go to polls question ID. / vote. With a post method. So our method equals post. Because we actually want to post our voting results. So it's user, oops. User token. And then we're going to loop through our choices. Choice in question dot choice. Choice set dot all. We want an input. And that will be of type radial. So it's easy to vote on it. Okay. And we're going to name it choice. Choice. Can I do singular quotes in here? Not sure.
I think double will work. I'm not 100%.
And our ID is going to be choice with our for loop counter appended to it. So that way it's a unique ID. for the counter. Okay. And then value that we're gonna send in, or the value of the radio. Gonna be choice.id.
So I think you had too many tags on line 5.
9.5. Oh, thank you.
Also, I noticed that you're going back to, this is like the default sending method information from a form, right? Are you going to show us how to grab it with JavaScript?
No, JavaScript is not part of today's demo. I'm not sure, Rafael, do you know when we're gonna see the JavaScript part? Or is that just React later on?
So we've seen it a little bit. I know I've given a couple demos that used Axios instead of traditional forms, but certainly when we cover React, that's when we're really going to get into the rhythm of like how we're actually going to be passing data back and forth front of the back end in a more like kind of long-term, more modern way.
What is the disadvantage of the standard form submission? I just don't really remember.
I would say that it's more rigid. Like all the standard form submission is going to do is send a bunch of key value pairs with a post request to a specific URL, which today that's really all we need to do. So that's fine. But in a lot of cases, like you would want to maybe send a different type of request, like a put or delete request instead of a post request. Maybe you would want to like process the data before you send it. So the front end is going to make sure that like all the fields are filled out and that they have correct data. Your email address is a real email address. You didn't just mash your keyboard or something. So for validation, I guess. There can be,
Sorry, go ahead.
like other input handling concerns, like debouncing a form is a thing. So making sure that they can only submit it once. If they click the button 3 times, it doesn't accidentally submit 3 forms. So there are a variety of things you might need JavaScript for handling your form submission.
Yeah, debouncing is a great example, Raphael. And like a good example too is think about a search bar where like as you type, you get that autocomplete behavior where you see like partial search results. Anything that tends towards that more like highly interactive kind of user interface is probably going to be easier to implement with JavaScript running in our browser to do a lot of that work. Like that search bar autocomplete, for example, we couldn't implement that without JavaScript because we would need to like be refreshing the page every time we got data from the server otherwise. For like kind of, it's called static forms, right? Then this approach is great. Honestly, the other reason why JavaScript is used more and more is because then there's only one language that your team doing all the user interface stuff has to work with. Also, Zainab, FYI, I don't know if it will break it, but on line 8, there's a space between value and the equal sign.
Okay, thank you.
For sure.
And we're using post here because we do want it to update our database.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
with the
sending in
form,
information. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you can say.
I was just gonna say with like an HTML form, like we're seeing here where we're using the form tag and depending on the browser's default behavior, I actually don't know if we can have it use something other than post, to be honest, and maybe we can, but I think that's its default behavior.
Yeah, HTML forms will only send get or post requests.
I didn't even know we could do a get request with a form. That's cool.
Yeah, it's not something you would do commonly, but they can.
Yeah, it's a good question,
I did
Alicia.
it for my search bar.
Ah, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Cool.
Any other questions? Okay. So the label, I'm adding 4. So we're attaching the label to this input. And we want to display the choice text. Choice text. Close loop tag. And we'll add a break. Okay. End our for loop. And add an input for, oops, for our submit as our submit button. So type in submit. And we just want it to save vote. Oops. I misspelled it. Okay. And then we can close our form as well. Oops. Keep pressing command. Form. Okay, so this should just display our radio buttons and allow us to submit. Let's also add one more thing up here. So let's say we're trying to vote and we didn't select anything before. So ideally, we would want to send an error message from the view back to this form, saying that something went wrong or like you need to select something. So let's add that. So if we have an error message, and again, this is something that we will define in the data that we're sending in when we do the render. That's the word. So with that. We will display our error message. That and then close our div. Okay, so everything looks good. If we check on our page, let's refresh this one. Awesome. Now we can see our radio button, and if we press vote, we get an error message. I forget the slashes sometimes. There we go. So afterwards, we have to put a slash. Let's try it again. Okay, this guy. Awesome. So it redirects to the page that says, or yeah, redirects to vote, and then it just says that we're voting on question 5 because that's what our view tells us. So we need to fix that. Okay. So now, what do we want to do? We have access to our question ID. So first thing we want to do is get our question by ID. But it seems like we're going to do this line a couple times. So we have it once in the detail and the vote and probably for the result too. So we can actually create a helper function up here that just says get question. And we just send the question ID. So we don't have a repeated line. So we can just copy this. Okay, so this will return the object that has that same ID. So in our detail, we can just say the question ID. And now in the vote thing, we can also, or in the vote method, we can also say question equals, oops, get question. Question ID. All right. So now that we have the question, we want to try to vote. So we'll do a try clause. And we want to get the selected choice. Choice dot, or sorry. So question dot choice dot get. So we want to get the choice using the primary key. So primary key equals, and here's where we use the post request that we did in the previous page. So request dot post at choice. So this will give us back, where is it? The ID of what we had chosen in the radio, button in the form. Okay. So if this doesn't work, if we didn't actually select anything, we're gonna have an exception. So key error. Choice dot does not exist.
So can you cover here, why are you just using post brackets choice versus post dot get parentheses choice?
I think both of them are the same, because if this is a dictionary, you can just access it through this. I believe this is a dictionary. So yeah, in dictionaries, you can access whatever it is you want by just doing the square brackets and the name of the key, and it will return the value.
Because I thought Raphael mentioned something about if it's empty or if it's potentially going to be empty, you'll get some sort of error. So you use post dot get instead.
We might have to, it's like that posting is like a dictionary-like object. So I'm not 100% on if we need to use get or if we can use bracket notation.
Yeah, so the way the code is written currently, we are strongly assuming that the post request will have a key called choice on the body. Well, actually, no, because that isn't a try block. So we're, I guess, actually kind of open-minded to the choice not existing. So there's a couple ways you can handle this. So what I've showed you before was just using post.get, which is like a safe way to retrieve some value from the dictionary. If the value doesn't exist, then it just returns none instead. And so you can check the value. If it's none or something else, you do different things. So here, request.post choice will throw an error if there is no choice on the post request. But since we're handling this in try except, then we can still respond to that key not existing in the except clause.
Okay.
Any other questions? Awesome. Okay. Let's return. So if we don't find a choice that was selected, we want to return an error message. So the way we can do this is to render the page, and then in the data, we're going to send in an error message, which we are expecting over here, right? So there's an error message, then okay. So this will take the request. It will also take the URL or the name of the page or template. So this would be details, HTML. And then we're also going to and then we're going to send in our data. So I guess we can define it here if we want. So we'll send in the question because that page has access to the question, or it also needs it. So let's just create question. And then question. And then we're also going to create error message. Many hours. Okay. And the error message will just say you didn't select a choice. I think I have my parentheses. And here we can just send in the data, and it should render an error if we don't select anything. Okay. But in the case that it does have a choice that was selected, so we want to add an else statement. The selected choice that we have, we would want to add one to the votes. So selected choice dot votes plus equals 1. And that's because in our model, we just have straight access to the votes. So now we just want to save. Okay, awesome. And in our HTTP response, we're actually going to do a redirect. So when you do a, what is it called? You would want to do a response redirect instead of just a regular response every time you're successfully dealing with post data. So you don't want to post twice. You don't want to post the data twice if you refresh the page or something like that. So you want to redirect to the page without using any data in the background too much. So I'm gonna, it should be, response redirect. And we're going to redirect to this URL. So polls / question ID / results. Okay. So this return actually should be under the else. Okay, so just to reiterate, we get our question, we get our selected choices. If there is no choice that was selected on the page, then we will throw an error and return to the details page with an error message. If not, then we add one to the votes we save it. And then we redirect to the results page.
Why
And
do you need that else statement if there's not an if statement?
I think the else is for the exception. So try this and do an exception, but if the exception doesn't go through, then go through this. I guess if it accepts, it's going to return, so you don't really need to do the else, because this will get executed afterwards. But yeah, this is syntax that I've seen before too.
Yeah,
Yeah, in this case, couldn't you actually remove the else and just unindent the code below it?
Mhm.
I think it makes your program flow the same way.
Yeah.
I honestly never use else in try except blocks. I just feel like there's always a way to write your code without it. And then there's just less syntax I have to think about. You might still be muted, by the way.
Thank you. Okay, so let's test this out. Let's see what happens. Let's go back to the polls, choose a question, and let's try voting without anything. Question has no attribute choice. Forgot to write choice set. That was my bad. Okay. Let's try it again.
Nice catch.
Thanks. Oh, choice is not being posted or let's see. Oh, details to detail. Which page?
You have it set to return details, but you called it detail on line 35.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay. So it said you didn't select a choice, which is what we expected. And then we do the vote. Then we go to the results. But we haven't really done anything to the results yet. So this is what we're expecting. Awesome. Okay. This is pretty much the last piece. So let's print out our results. Okay.
So
Mhm.
that sounds like, so if you had post dot get choice there,
Here.
then yeah, So it sounds like this would be a good reason why you would want to use post, is because you want to tell the user that they didn't select something, right? Whereas if you had used post dot get, then they wouldn't have necessarily received that error message. What would have happened if it was empty then? It just wouldn't have worked.
So it would probably return none. In that case, instead of just having an accept clause that will catch an error message, you would have to manually say, if selected choice is none, then do this. Then you would
Gotcha.
render this page with the error message. So this is kind of like one less step, I guess, but not really. So it's just two different ways of doing it. Yeah. So instead of manually checking, this is kind of just catching the errors automatically. Okay, so our results. So we have our question ID. We're going to do the same and grab our question. Question equals. Yeah, question. ID. And we are going to return a render with our request. Oops. And our page, so that will be polls app slash results. HTML. And our last thing is our data. So we're just going to send in the question itself. Okay. So now we're handling the result on the back end, but now we need to edit, or we need to create a template for our result page. So let's create results.html. Awesome. Question. And then question.id. And we can display our question text. And we'll list out all of our choices and their respective votes. So we're going to do a loop for choice in questions.choice set all. Display the text. Voice.votes. And this is something pretty cool that I learned not long ago. So you can write this. So vote, if it's like one vote, I want it to be one vote, but if it's more than one, I want it to be votes. So what you're able to do is, oops, so input the value that you're trying to see, if it's a singular or plural, and then type pluralize. And it automatically takes care of the pluralization of this word.
Zainab, do we need the % symbols for the choice.text, choice.votes equality comparison? Or I'm not super familiar with
Here?
the Django syntax, so I think I could just use a little help.
Wait, which one here?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with like Django templates.
No, for this one, it's just a variable, pretty much.
Okay, and I honestly just missaw on the screen. I thought that was a double equals, and it's two dashes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry.
No,
So
it's-
just to clarify, for variables in the Django templates, you do not use the % signs, but for control flow things like for loops and if statements, and then also the other like special template tags, like the CSRF token or whatever, those do use the percent signs.
So here I'm just gonna add one last thing, which is a link to a previous page. A link to the detail page, so you can actually vote again if you want to, so. Trap. Question, ID. Detail. We're just gonna put the text vote again.
Hey, that's voter fraud right there.
Awesome. Okay, so this will hopefully work. Let's test it out. Okay, vote on this one. Not much. Vote. Awesome. Now we have a vote here and a vote there because we voted earlier on this one. But I'm not seeing our link because I forgot to close the tag. That makes sense. Okay. Let's refresh this. Awesome. So now if I go to vote again, it will give me an error. Which I'm pretty sure it's that. Is it just detail? Should be. Oh, it's not detail at all. I think it's just the question ID. Because that was what the detail page was. So let's go back to polls. Let's try this one. Awesome. So vote again. There it goes. Okay. So now we can add here. Let's try to see if the pluralization works. So if we do another one for this one. Awesome. 2 votes. And it works. Any questions?
So does the pluralization work for, what is it? I'm assuming it like pulls from a dictionary or something, like regardless of what word we use?
I think so. I was actually curious too. So let's say any. See what happens. Oh, I think it just adds an S.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Which isn't really helpful for words that it doesn't work for, but it's pretty useful for the normal ones, I guess. What else? Any other questions? No. Did this hopefully kind of I guess like put things together in a way, in a better way? Does it make more sense now? A little bit using the models with Django. Yeah. Awesome. Does anyone have anything else? Before let's stop this.
It's not, so I definitely feel like this helps, but so a problem I was running into last night was just trying to do Friday's homework was like just with the tests. Like, I don't know, like, does that make sense? Like this seems to make sense, but when I'm trying to like actually run the test, it seems totally different.
What tests? So you were creating tests to like
It was so like on Friday's assessment, you just like, I think they're already ran. And that's kind of, or I'm sorry, the tests are already created, but you're trying to get them to work. And that's where I started running into issues. Like I didn't know even how to start, if that makes sense. I don't know, maybe that's a better question to ask like offline.
I think I'd need a little more information. I'm not sure how to answer that, honestly. Yeah. Do you want to talk about it more, or?
I mean, I don't want to take up everyone's time. It's probably easier if